Welcome back, guys, to Blackout War Stories. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. Thank you. The jungle never lets go of you. Even now, 20 years later, I can still feel the weight of that air. Thick, wet, alive. It was 2004, deep in the Peruvian Amazon. My unit had been sent there for a joint operation with local commandos. Just a 2-week mission. Training, reconnaissance, nothing special. We were 6 days in when things started to go wrong. The radios began to fail after sunset. The air felt heavier. The locals stopped talking at night. They said something was watching us from the trees. We laughed at first. Soldiers laugh when things feel strange. Then one of our own, Sergeant Collins, went missing on perimeter watch. No sound, no sign of struggle. We found his gear laid out on the trail, neat and clean, boots lined side by side, rifle propped against a tree, his flashlight still on, beam pointed into the dark. That was the first night I realized the jungle was not empty, and something in it knew our names. My name is Staff Sergeant Daniel Ross, United States Army, 7th Special Forces Group. Back then, I had 6 years in, 3 tours between Afghanistan and Colombia. I thought I had seen everything a jungle could throw at a man. I was wrong. In February 2004, our team got orders to join a combined exercise with the Peruvian Army. Officially, it was a counter-narcotics mission. Unofficially, it was a low-visibility recon op. We were supposed to collect intel on possible cartel routes near the Madre de Dios River and test new radio systems in deep canopy. There were 8 of us on the U.S. side. Captain Lee led the detachment. Sergeant First Class Harris was our team sergeant. Then came Collins, Ramirez, Tucker, Hines, Miller, and me. Vega led the Peruvian element. He was quiet, built like wire, and had eyes that never stopped moving. He'd spent his life in that jungle. We inserted by CH-47 out of Puerto Maldonado. It was a 2-hour flight, then a fast rope into a small clearing surrounded by trees so thick the sunlight barely reached the ground. The humidity hit like a wall. Every breath tasted like wet soil. The first days went smooth. Standard movement, patrol by day, set up perimeter by night. We used thermal scans, tripwires, claymores. The Peruvians moved like ghosts, barefoot most of the time. Vega said it helped them feel the ground better. At first, the forest was just noise. Monkeys, frogs, birds. But the deeper we went, the quieter it became. The sound stopped in waves, as if the jungle itself was listening. On the second night, Vega told us not to wander past the firelight. He said the forest had voices that called out to the living. He called it El Tunchi. We figured it was a local legend, a scare story for new recruits. No one took it seriously. By the third day, we reached the first target site, an old drug lab burned out and abandoned. The smell of chemicals still hung in the air. Rusted barrels, broken glass, remains of a tarp roof half buried in vines. I marked the coordinates while Hines tried to get a radio ping to HQ. Nothing. He cycled channels, switched batteries, checked the antenna. Still nothing. We chalked it up to interference. The jungle messes with signals. That evening, the Peruvians refused to take North Watch. Vega said the wind carried bad voices there. Harris didn't care. He assigned Collins. Collins was a good man, calm, focused, Ranger tab, never spooked by anything. He took his post at 0200. By 0400, he was gone. No gunfire, no radio call, no sign of a fight. Just his rifle leaning against a tree and his boots neatly set beside it. His footprints stopped 5 feet from the post. Vega said quietly, El Tunchi took him. No one answered. We stayed up the rest of that night, rifles ready. Every sound made someone flinch. At first light, we started searching. 10 meters apart, slow and steady. Nothing. The jungle had swallowed him whole. By the time we regrouped, Harris looked 10 years older. Lee told us to move to the next site. No delays. We couldn't risk losing more time. Vega's men whispered prayers as we packed up. I didn't know the words, but I understood the fear. Before we left that clearing, I looked back at the tree line. Something about it felt wrong. Still. Too still. And for the first time, I felt like we weren't the ones doing the watching. We spent most of the next day searching for Collins, but the jungle gave us nothing. It was like he had been erased. The ground was soft and muddy, but not a single print led away from the post. No drag marks, no broken branches, no signs of struggle. Harris finally called it off by late afternoon. He looked angry, but mostly he looked lost. Losing a man without an answer is worse than losing one in a fight. At least in a fight, you know what happened. Here, it felt like the ground itself took him. The air grew heavier that night. Our radios were still down, and the silence around camp was constant. The Peruvians kept whispering among themselves in Quechua. Vega warned us again to stay inside the perimeter and not to follow any voices we might hear. Harris told him to stop spreading ghost stories, but I could tell even he didn't believe his own words anymore. When men who live in the jungle start to look afraid of it, you pay attention. We moved out at sunrise. The humidity made every breath feel like drinking water. Flies and mosquitoes covered our hands no matter how much repellent we used. After a few hours, the ground began to slope downward toward a swampy basin. The water there was still and dark, like oil. Vega said it was a shortcut to the next waypoint, so we crossed single file. The mud swallowed our boots with every step, and each pull free made a wet sucking sound that echoed through the trees. Tucker said it sounded like the ground breathing. No one laughed. By the 5th day, we reached the second site. This one wasn't abandoned, it looked recent. The fire pits were still warm, and footprints were fresh. Whoever had been there had left in a hurry. We moved in with weapons up, no contact, no sound. Just the smell of gasoline and burnt plastic. Lee ordered me and Vega to sweep the perimeter. Halfway through the circuit, I caught a faint noise. It sounded like a woman singing. The tone was soft and steady, drifting through the canopy like wind. Vega stopped and looked pale. He told me not to move. Then he whispered, "Do not answer it." The voice faded, and we returned to camp without a word. That night, Ramirez couldn't sleep. He kept staring into the dark, saying he heard someone calling his name. We told him it was stress, maybe exhaustion. The heat, the bugs, the constant noise, it all eats at your head after a while. Around midnight, he went quiet. I thought he'd finally fallen asleep, but when I checked his cot an hour later, it was empty. Same as Colin's. His gear was neatly packed, boots by the fire, rifle resting against a tree, no footprints, no signs of where he went. Harris didn't even speak. He just kicked the dirt and walked off into the trees for a while. When he came back, he ordered double watch and no movement after dark. By then, even the Peruvians refused to talk. Vega's men began to mark their faces with ash. He said it was protection from El Tunchi, the forest spirit that mimics voices. According to him, once you answer your own name, it knows you. I tried to shake it off, but that night I kept hearing faint echoes my name, quiet and close, like someone whispering through a radio. I didn't answer. I just sat there, eyes on the trees, finger on the trigger, waiting for something to move. The next morning we packed fast. No one spoke much. The jungle felt wrong now, thicker somehow, like it was watching us leave. I saw Vega glance over his shoulder several times as we walked, mumbling something under his breath. When we stopped for a break, he told me that Collins and Ramirez weren't lost. He said they had been called. I wanted to argue, but nothing I could say felt right. Men don't vanish without sound, without trace. There was no logical way to explain it, and logic doesn't last long out there anyway. We had one more site to hit before extraction. Lee said we'd move at first light, make contact with base, and get out before nightfall. I hoped he was right. But as the sun went down, I started hearing the voice again. Only this time, it was my own voice calling from somewhere deep in the trees. The morning after Ramirez vanished, the camp was quiet. No one wanted to eat. The jungle around us looked the same, but it felt different. The air was heavier, the colors darker. It's hard to explain, but it felt like the forest was alive in a way we couldn't see. We packed up before sunrise. Lee said we'd hit the final site, then find a way to get comms working and call for pickup. None of us argued. Everyone just moved, faces blank, eyes forward. We pushed deeper into the green. The canopy above was so thick the light turned into a dim, green fog. Everything smelled of wet leaves and decay. My clothes never dried. Sweat and rain mixed until it was impossible to tell the difference. We moved slow, weapons ready, 5 meters spacing. The only sound came from our own movement. No birds, no insects, nothing else. By midday, Tucker stopped walking. He pointed ahead, to a gap between two massive trees. I didn't see anything at first. Then just for a second I caught movement. A figure, small, maybe the size of a child, standing barefoot in the mud, half hidden by the brush. It turned and vanished before anyone else could see. Tucker whispered, "You saw that, right?" I nodded. We advanced, careful and quiet. The ground there was marked with prints, small, human-like, but clean. Too clean. The prints ended suddenly at a fallen log. No sign of where they went. Vega studied the prints, his face pale. He said it wasn't a person. He said the forest sometimes made shapes to confuse travelers. We didn't press him. We just kept moving. A few hours later, the smell started. Sweet like flowers, but mixed with rot. It hit all of us at once. Harris said it reminded him of a morgue. The air got still. No wind, no sound. Vega ordered a halt. We scanned the trees. Nothing moved, but the smell stayed strong. Then it disappeared as fast as it came, like it had never been there. We reached high ground by late afternoon, a small ridge above a riverbed. Lee decided to set camp there. We needed rest, and the slope gave us a view of the valley below. We set trip flares, claymores, and a perimeter of chem lights. I was assigned second watch with Tucker. That night, the jungle came alive again. Frogs croaked, water dripped, and somewhere far off, a branch snapped. Around 200, Tucker nudged me. "You hear that?" he whispered. I listened. A faint whistle floated through the trees. Slow, rhythmic, like someone trying to play a tune. Then I heard my name. Soft close. "Daniel?" It was my own voice. My stomach tightened. I turned my headlamp toward the sound, but the beam hit only mist. Tucker aimed his rifle and whispered, "You said something?" I shook my head. The voice came again. Same tone, same words, same rhythm. It was me, whispering my own name from the dark. Tucker's breathing grew fast. He whispered, "Man, that's your voice." He was right. It was. I could hear every syllable, every break. "Daniel?" Now it came from behind us. I swung my rifle around. Nothing. Tucker stepped forward, eyes wide. I reached out to stop him, but before I could grab him, he vanished. No sound, no movement. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. I called out, no answer. Then one of the trip flares went off near the eastern post. Red light cut through the trees. I ran toward it, rifle up. The flare burned bright in the mist. I saw Tucker's rifle stuck upright in the mud, his helmet floating in the shallow river nearby. That was all. I brought the others. Vega's men refused to search. They sat by the fire, chanting under their breath. Lee stood over Tucker's rifle, hands on his head, saying nothing. Harris looked at the prints near the bank. Barefoot again, small, human, leading nowhere. By dawn, we had lost 3 men. Lee gathered us around and said, "We finished the mission. One more site, then extraction. We move at first light." His voice was steady, but I could see the fear in his eyes. The jungle was winning, and it wasn't finished yet. We broke camp before sunrise. The sky was gray, and mist clung low to the trees. No one said much. Losing 3 men in less than a week didn't make sense. Not without gunfire or signs of contact. Still, we moved. The jungle doesn't give you time to think. You just keep walking and hope the next step doesn't take you somewhere worse. The path ahead narrowed until we had to move single file. Every branch brushed against our faces. Lee led from the front, Vega second, then me, Hines, Miller, and Harris at the rear. The humidity was brutal. My rifle felt like it weighed 50 pounds. The sound of dripping water never stopped. Around midday, Hines got a weak radio signal. Static at first, then half words. "Check. Copy. Bravo. What's your location?" Then it faded. He tried again, adjusted the antenna, swapped batteries, but the jungle swallowed the signal. It was the first time we'd heard another human voice in days. It made the silence worse. By the time the sun started to drop, we found an open patch of ground with a stream nearby. We decided to stop there. Everyone looked drained. Miller's shoulder wound had started to smell, the cut from that stake trap refusing to heal right. He said it itched deep inside like something crawling under the skin. Vega cleaned it with iodine and wrapped it again, but Miller just stared at the trees, mumbling. That trap still bothered me. It wasn't cartel work. Too old school, too handmade. Vega said it was from the locals who once worshipped the forest. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I remembered the clean carvings on the stakes, symbols burned into the tips. They looked fresh. Someone had made them recently. We ate in silence. No one lit a big fire, just small flames for heat. Around 2200, Lee called a meeting. He said extraction had to happen soon, with or without confirmation from command. We had coordinates for all 3 sites, and he wanted to be out before we lost anyone else. Vega agreed. He told us that the forest grows angry when too much blood is spilled. The others tried to sleep. I couldn't. I sat watching the fire die, listening to the rain. Around 300, Harris took over my shift. I handed him the watch log and told him to stay sharp. He nodded, still chewing a piece of jerky. I lay down just long enough for the rain to ease. Then I woke to shouting. Hines was yelling Harris's name. I jumped up. His rifle was gone. The fire had burned low. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the perimeter. Nothing, not a sound. His cot was empty, same as the others before. His gear lay in a neat pile beside the log. Even his knife was cleaned and sheathed. Lee looked at me and didn't need to say it. We both knew. Vega's men refused to keep moving after that. They said the forest had taken its share and would not stop. They spoke of Tunchi again, of how it walks without a body, how it steals the sound of your soul and uses it to call others. Hines started crying quietly. He said he'd heard Harris's voice over the radio right before he disappeared. Lee gathered us. We finished the mission, he said. We'll hit the last site at dawn, then get out. Whatever's here, we're leaving it behind. The jungle was black again by the time he finished. I could hear my own heartbeat. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked. Then came the whispering again. Our own names, one by one. Hines dropped to his knees, hands over his ears shaking. Vega's men began to pray. I gripped my rifle tight and focused on the fire. The voices stopped suddenly like someone flipped a switch. The silence that followed felt heavier than sound. We didn't sleep the rest of the night. When the first light broke through the canopy, we were already packed. None of us spoke. We were down to 5 Americans and 3 Peruvians now. We didn't know what waited at the next site, but we knew it would be bad. I kept my eyes forward as we walked, watching the fog shift between the trees. Every few minutes, I thought I saw movement in the corner of my vision. Shadows sliding between trunks, always just far enough that I couldn't be sure. We kept walking, because stopping meant listening, and listening meant hearing your own name again. We reached the last site near midday. The terrain opened into a clearing surrounded by thick trees and hanging vines. From a distance, it looked like another burned-out lab. When we got closer, we saw bones, hundreds of them, spread through the mud like driftwood after a flood. At first, I thought they were animal remains. Then I saw dog tags tangled in a vine. Peruvian Army, 1978. Lee knelt beside a skull with a rusted helmet still half attached. He brushed off the dirt and looked at Vega. What happened here? Vega didn't answer right away. He stared at the ground and said, They came to hunt Tunchi. I felt my stomach tighten. You're saying this thing did that? He nodded. The forest keeps what it claims. It was hard to process. Dozens of soldiers, gone for decades, and no one ever found them. The place smelled like wet bone and rust. Every step cracked something underfoot. Hines refused to move further in. He said the trees looked like they were leaning toward us. I couldn't tell if it was the light or the fog, but he was right. The canopy seemed to close tighter the longer we stayed. We set a small perimeter and tried the radios again. For the first time in days, we got a response. Static at first, then a voice breaking through. Bravo. Copy. 12 hours. Hold position. That was all. It sounded like command. It sounded real. 12 hours. That's what we had to survive. We reinforced the clearing. Claymores in a half circle. Trip flares every 10 meters. Overlapping fields of fire. It was textbook defense, but none of it felt like it mattered. We weren't fighting something we could see. We were trying to hold off the jungle itself. As the sun dropped, fog rolled in from the east, thick, white, and cold. The temperature fell fast. The jungle never gets cold, but that night it did. The mist climbed over our boots, then up to our knees. Sound changed. It felt muffled, like being underwater. I took first watch with Hines. We sat side by side, rifles across our laps, eyes on the tree line. The others tried to rest, but no one slept. I could hear them shifting, breathing fast. Then came the noise. It started as a hum, low and constant, not from one direction, but all around us. It grew until it became a chorus of whispers. We couldn't make out words, but we knew it was voices. Hines whispered, "They're behind us." I turned. The fog was moving. Shapes formed inside it. Human outlines, faint and slow. Lee shouted a warning. Harris's voice, only it wasn't Harris, answered from inside the mist. "Hold your fire. It's me." We froze. Harris had been gone for 2 days. Lee raised his rifle and said, "Identify yourself." The shape moved closer. "It's me, Captain." "Lower your weapon." The fog cleared just enough for a second. I saw him, barefoot, shirt torn, eyes blank. His skin was pale, almost gray. He smiled, but it didn't look right. Vega whispered, "It's not him." The shape stepped closer. "Come on, sir. We have to go." Vega fired first. The bullet hit square in the chest. Harris, or whatever it was, fell backward and vanished into the mist. No blood, just gone. The jungle erupted in laughter. Not human laughter, but a broken echo, as if the trees were mocking us. We opened fire in all directions. The flares went off. Red and white light cut through the fog. Shadows moved between the trees, fast and low. We saw hands, faces, fragments, never whole. The gunfire stopped after a minute. No return fire, just silence again. We held position the rest of the night, eyes on the mist, fingers on triggers. No one spoke. When dawn finally came, the fog pulled back slowly, curling around the trees like smoke. Nothing moved, no bodies, no footprints, just the same clearing and the same bones. Vega looked at the sun rising through the canopy and said, "It's testing us now." Lee checked his watch, 6 hours left. I remember thinking, we might not make it that long. That was the moment the mission stopped being about survival and became something else. It felt like we weren't supposed to leave that jungle alive. The morning after the fog, no one spoke. We didn't need to. We all saw enough to know this wasn't a normal operation anymore. The air felt thick and cold, like breathing through a wet rag. Even the birds were gone. The jungle had gone quiet again, and when the jungle goes silent, it means something is close. Lee gave orders in a low voice. We'd hold position until extraction. No more movement. We checked our gear, reloaded, and rechecked the perimeter. Vega's men spread salt in a circle around the camp. Harris would have laughed at that, but he wasn't there anymore. None of us were laughing. Around 900, Miller said he saw something near the tree line. I moved beside him. Through the mist, I saw a figure standing still, halfway hidden by vines. It looked like Ramirez. Same height, same gear. But he'd been gone for days. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there watching us. Lee raised his rifle and called out, "Identify yourself." No response. Then the figure tilted its head and smiled. We opened fire. The first burst hit center mass. It didn't fall. The fog around it twisted, and then it was gone. No body, no blood. That was the moment we realized nothing we did mattered. Vega said the forest was playing with us now. That El Tunchi was close. He said once you hear its voice, it marks you. It doesn't stop until you answer. I kept my eyes on the trees. Every shadow looked like a person. Every vine looked like a hand. The smell came back too, that sweet rot mixed with flowers. I wanted to believe it was from the dead soldiers nearby, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. By noon, the mist grew thicker again. It rolled in from the river, swallowing the clearing. Visibility dropped to 10 meters. Vega ordered his men to light torches. The smoke mixed with the fog and made the air burn. We could barely breathe. Then came the whispering again. Not distant this time. It was close, inside the camp. Hines froze. "It's behind us," he said. His hands shook so bad he dropped his rifle. Before I could grab him, a hand came out of the fog and pulled him backward. Fast. He didn't even scream, just vanished. Lee fired toward the sound. The muzzle flash lit up shapes all around us. Faces in the fog, pale and hollow. Dozens of them closing in. We opened up, full auto, short bursts. The air filled with gunfire and smoke. The flares went off, bathing everything in red. Shadows moved between the trees, gliding more than running. They had no sound, no weight. Miller threw a grenade. The explosion shook the ground. Leaves and branches rained down. But when the smoke cleared, the shapes were still there. Watching, waiting. I shouted for everyone to fall back to the ridge. We grabbed what we could and ran. I didn't look back. I could hear the laughter behind us, that same broken echo, overlapping like a dozen voices at once. We stumbled down a narrow trail, half blind from smoke. The fog followed us, sliding through the trees like it was alive. Lee shouted for direction, but no one knew where we were anymore. Vega said he recognized the river by sound. We moved toward it. We lost one of Vega's men along the way. He fell behind, maybe tripped. When we turned to help, he was gone too. The fog closed over him like water. The jungle swallowed the noise. We didn't stop until we hit the riverbank. The current was fast and brown. Lee called a halt. "We hold here," he said out of breath. "Extractions in 6 hours, we can make it." No one answered. We just stood there. Rifles ready, eyes scanning the tree line. The mist hovered above the water, drifting closer. Vega knelt and whispered a prayer. I didn't know the words, but I understood the meaning. He didn't think we'd leave that place alive. The wind shifted. The smell came back again, stronger. Sweet, rotten, heavy. I could almost taste it. That's when we heard it. Harris's voice. It came from across the river, calm, clear. "Ross, it's safe here. Come across." Lee looked at me. His face said everything. We both knew Harris was dead, but the voice didn't stop. "Ross, you don't have to run anymore." I gripped my rifle until my knuckles hurt. "You're not him," I said under my breath. The jungle laughed again, and this time I swear I felt it breathe. The voice kept calling from across the river. It wasn't shouting. It spoke in a steady, calm tone, just loud enough for us to hear over the water. It used my name every time. Each word sounded like my own voice, played back through static. Lee gripped my shoulder and whispered, "Ignore it." I nodded, but the voice didn't stop. It started using other names. Tucker, Ramirez, Collins, one by one. Then out of nowhere, Vega shouted something in Spanish. I turned. His eyes were wide. He pointed at the trees behind us. The fog was rising again, thicker, moving fast. It crawled toward us, wrapping around trunks and branches like smoke. The air turned cold. Lee gave the order. "Move! Now!" We followed the riverbank south, hoping to reach higher ground. The path was narrow, roots and vines everywhere. Every few steps, I thought I heard footsteps behind us. Hines was gone, but I kept hearing his breathing. The fog stayed close, whispering our names again and again. Sometimes it sounded like crying, sometimes like laughter. We ran until we reached a slope leading up to a ridge. Lee climbed first, then waved us forward. Miller struggled, slipping on wet ground. I grabbed his arm and pulled. That's when something slammed into him from behind. It wasn't an animal. It was faster. He went face first into the dirt. I fired into the fog. Short bursts. No target. Miller was gone. The only thing left was his helmet rolling down the slope. Lee shouted my name, but his voice came from 2 directions. One ahead of me, one behind. I froze. Vega saw my hesitation and yelled, "Don't listen!" He fired 3 rounds into the mist, grabbed my vest and dragged me up the ridge. When we reached the top, the air was clearer. The fog stayed below, swirling around the trees like a living thing. I looked down at the river, but it was gone, hidden under a blanket of white. We were 4 now, me, Lee, Vega, and one Peruvian soldier named Santos. We took positions along the ridge, rifles ready. Lee checked the radio again. Nothing but static. Time dragged. The light dimmed even though the sun was still high. Vega said the jungle was closing. He said it would try one last time to take us before dark. I wanted to tell him to stop talking, but deep down, I knew he was right. Then the sound came back. Not whispers this time. Singing, soft and slow, like a woman humming from far away. Santos began to shake. He said it was his mother's voice. Before anyone could stop him, he stood and walked toward the sound. Vega grabbed him, but he tore free and ran down the slope. We heard his footsteps fade, then silence. Lee cursed under his breath. "We can't stay here." We moved west, deeper along the ridge, following the terrain toward open ground. Every few minutes I caught glimpses of figures moving beside us, shadows sliding through the fog, matching our pace. They never came closer. The air grew heavy again. My vision blurred. The smell of rot filled my nose. I started feeling dizzy, like the ground was moving. Vega stopped and dropped to one knee. He said the forest was inside our heads now. Lee told him to get up, but Vega didn't move. He started praying again, louder this time. I turned to cover our rear. That's when something hit Lee. It came from above, fast and hard. I saw him fall forward, rifle flying from his hands. I fired at the movement, but the recoil barely registered. The fog swallowed everything. When I reached him, he was on his back, eyes open, staring at nothing. His neck was twisted, no blood, no marks, just wrong. Vega pulled me back by the vest. "We can't help him," he said. His voice was shaking. I wanted to argue, but my body wouldn't move right. My legs felt numb. The fog pressed closer, circling us again. I could see shapes forming inside it. Faces, dozens of them. Some looked familiar. Collins, Ramirez, Tucker, even Lee standing now, smiling from inside the mist. Vega fired into the fog, shouting, "You don't belong here." I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the river. We stumbled down the slope. The mist followed. When we hit the water, it was ice cold. The current tore at our legs. We held onto each other, pushing through. Behind us, the laughter came again, echoing across the river. We made it to the far bank and collapsed on the mud, gasping. The fog stopped at the waterline. It hovered there like it couldn't cross. Vega lay beside me, breathing hard. "You must not look back," he said quietly. I didn't. Not then, not after. I didn't want to see what was waiting in that fog. When we reached the other side of the river, it felt like we had crossed into another world. The air was lighter, warmer. The trees looked different, thinner. The fog stayed behind us, rolling back like a tide that had gone as far as it could. I remember lying on the mud, too tired to speak, just listening to the sound of the current. For the first time in days, the jungle sounded normal again. Birds called in the distance. Insects buzzed. The world seemed alive, but not hostile. Vega was quiet. His face was pale and covered in mud. His uniform was ripped, his rifle gone. We sat there until the light changed, and I realized the sun was already setting. He looked up at me and said, "It doesn't cross water." "Not this water," I didn't ask how he knew. I just nodded. Some things in that place didn't need explaining. We followed the river upstream until we found an old camp, mostly collapsed under vines and dirt. There were rusted tins, a half-broken radio, and the remains of a fire pit. It looked like it hadn't been used in years. We decided to stay there. We were down to 2 men. Everything felt hollow. I remember checking my watch and realizing it was only 1800 hours. Extraction was supposed to come around dawn, if command even got our last message. Vega built a small fire, using dry wood from under an old tarp. The smoke rose straight up, no wind. He handed me a piece of hard bread from his pack. Neither of us ate much. The silence between us was heavy, but it wasn't the same silence from before. It was calm, like the jungle had stopped watching. Maybe it was giving us a chance to leave. When darkness came, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fire, rifle across my knees, eyes on the tree line. The sound of running water was constant. Around midnight, Vega spoke softly. He said the jungle had its own laws, that every tree, every river, every hill had a guardian. He said the forest punished those who took without respect. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure if he was talking about the mission or the men we lost. Maybe both. A little after 0400, the radio crackled to life. At first, I thought it was more voices, but this time it was clear. "Bravo team, do you copy? Extraction inbound. Smoke signal if possible." I didn't wait. I grabbed the radio, answered, and gave coordinates. The operator repeated confirmation twice, then the line went dead. I shook Vega awake. His eyes opened slow, like he already knew what I was going to say. He smiled once and said, "Then it's over." We packed fast and followed the river again. By the time the first light broke through the trees, we reached a clearing big enough for a helicopter. I fired a flare. Red smoke rose and disappeared into the canopy. The sound of rotors came not long after. A Black Hawk broke through the mist, blades cutting the air like thunder. I could have cried when I saw it. The bird came down slow, kicking up dust and leaves. Vega stopped walking. He turned to face the trees and whispered something in Spanish. Then he looked at me and said, "Don't look back when we lift off." I nodded. I didn't ask why. We ran toward the helicopter, ducked under the blades, and climbed in. The crew chief pulled us inside and gave a thumbs up. As the chopper lifted, I felt the ground drop away. The jungle shrank beneath us, a green ocean fading under the clouds. I looked at Vega. He was staring straight ahead, his lips moving in silent prayer. I kept my eyes forward, like he told me. But as we climbed higher, something made me turn. Down below, through the break in the trees, I saw someone standing near the riverbank, barefoot, wearing a uniform. He was waving. It looked like Collins. The flight back to Puerto Maldonado felt longer than it should have. Neither of us spoke during the ride. The crew didn't ask questions either. They just looked at us, saw our faces, and knew better. We were covered in mud and sweat, uniforms torn, eyes hollow. When the helicopter touched down at the forward site, the air felt unreal, too clean, too quiet. A medic came running, but I pushed him off. I wasn't hurt, not in a way he could fix. Vega stepped off behind me and crossed himself before his boots hit the ground. The pilot shouted something about a debrief. I barely heard him. My ears were still full of jungle noise that wasn't there anymore. Command met us inside a small tent with fans that barely moved the air. 2 officers sat across the table, one American, one Peruvian. They asked what happened. I told them the truth, or at least part of it. I said we lost contact, lost men, and the jungle made navigation impossible. I told them about the fog, the sounds, and the disappearances, but I kept the rest to myself. The part about the voices, the shapes, the faces. I couldn't say it out loud without feeling like I'd lose my mind. They took notes, exchanged looks, and called it an environmental confusion event. That was the official term. The report said we were disoriented by weather and stress. They labeled the missing men presumed dead, non-combat causes. That was it. Weeks of training, months of planning, and 6 lives written off with 1 line. I stayed another week for medical evaluation. They said I was physically fine. Vega left the next morning. He didn't shake my hand, just looked at me and said, "The forest remembers." Then he walked away and never looked back. I flew home a few days later. My wife met me at the airport, smiling, trying to act normal. I hugged her, but part of me was still there, in that clearing with the fog and the whispering trees. At night, I'd wake up sweating, hearing my name whispered through the static hum of the ceiling fan. Sometimes it sounded like Collins, sometimes like myself. Months passed. I tried to move on, kept my head down, focused on the job, but the noise never really left. Every time it rained, I'd catch the smell of wet soil, and for a moment, I'd be back in that jungle. I even caught myself avoiding wooded areas, like my body remembered something my mind didn't want to. Years later, I tried to find Vega. I wanted to know if he ever went back. The Peruvian liaison said he'd been reassigned to a remote base near Cusco, then disappeared on a solo patrol in 2008. No one found him. I went through the official files once more before I left active duty. All of our maps, coordinates, radio logs, gone. The section was blanked out, labeled classified. Someone buried that mission deep, maybe to protect us, maybe to hide something worse. I still dream about that night, the mist rolling in, the faces in the trees, the sound of my name coming from somewhere behind me. I always wake before I turn around. Maybe that's what's keeping me alive. The last time I saw Vega's face was on the flight out. He told me not to look back, but I did, and what I saw has stayed with me every day since. The jungle doesn't forget. It waits, it listens. Sometimes when I walk near woods or hear wind through trees, I catch that sound again. That faint voice, quiet, patient, like it's been waiting all this time. It says my name once, soft and calm, and I never answer. It's been more than 20 years now. I still see the jungle when I close my eyes. I can feel the air pressing against my skin, hear the river running somewhere far off, and smell that mix of mud and decay. Most of the time, it fades after a few minutes, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it stays until I turn on a light and remind myself I'm home. People ask about that mission. They always want to know what really happened. I tell them we lost good men in rough terrain. That's the version everyone can live with. No one wants to hear about things that don't fit into a report. The truth wouldn't help anyone sleep better. I've come to believe what Vega said, that the forest remembers. Maybe it isn't about spirits or curses. Maybe it's something deeper. The jungle is old. It's seen everything humans have done to it. It keeps score. We walked into a place that didn't want us there, and we paid for it. There are nights when the wind outside sounds too much like breathing. When I hear a faint whistle drift through the trees, I turn down the lights and wait. The sound always fades before dawn, but I never look out the window when it happens. I don't want to see what might be waiting there. I still have Colin's old knife. They found it in my pack after we got back. Sometimes I catch myself turning it over in my hand without knowing why. It feels like a piece of that jungle still clings to it, like it never really left us. If you ever find yourself deep in that part of the Amazon and the forest goes quiet, don't stop. Don't listen. Keep moving. If you hear your own voice calling from the trees, don't answer. Just keep walking. Don't turn off your lights yet. If you like the video, hit like and watch the next amazing horror story showing on your screen.